So I made a poll in my community tab asking what my next video should be, and the ending of Red Dead 2 won. I was actually pretty surprised by this, as I was fully expecting Hell of a Boss Part 2 to win, especially because new worst episode has dropped since my video, but that's for another time. In this video, I'm going to talk about all 4 endings of Red Dead Redemption 2, so spoilers. So I'll start with a little explanation of how the multiple endings in Red Dead 2 work. In Red Dead 2, there's an honor system. This honor system determines how Arthur acts around others and is a major part in deciding the endings. Arthur will lose honor if you basically play him like it's GTA, killing, robbing, being an asshole, you know. You pretty much have to try to get low honor, as you have to go out of your way to do these things. On the other side, there's high honor. You will earn honor every time you help someone, finish a mission, or even if you just run around and say hi to people. The game strongly pushes for you to have high honor, or at the very least it puts you in the middle of the road, which is functionally high honor. But Arthur's honor is not the only thing that decides the ending. There is a choice in the last mission that is also a big factor. This choice is to either run with John and help him reunite with his family so they can try to live a normal life, or to go back and get some money the gang has stashed away. Well, it sounds like it's just one good choice and one asshole choice. In actuality, it's a bit more complex than that. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get on to the endings themselves. These endings have some of the same stuff in them, so I'll try to not repeat myself too much whenever that happens. We'll start with the worst ending, which is low honor and go for the money. This ending is Arthur failing redemption. While Arthur is walking from the camp with the money, he gets jumped by Micah. Micah tells Arthur that he knew Arthur would come back because he's just as greedy as everyone else. Arthur admits that yeah, he wants the money, but he also wants Micah dead. Micah, to put it shortly, is a rat. He has been in Dutch's ear throughout the entire game, coercing him into doing things that ultimately harmed the gang while saying that it was in the name of the greater good. At this point in the story, everybody knows that Mike is a traitor. He was providing information to the goddamn Pinkertons, a group of detectives trying to take down Dutch and the gang. He was trying to play both sides, but all he ended up doing was destroying both. Micah tackles Arthur to the ground and stabs him in the chest. Micah sarcastically goes, "Oh shit, look what I got and done," before Micah gloats over his victory, saying that Arthur lost, but Arthur says that he didn't lose. He said that he stopped Micah and told everyone that he was a rat. This makes Micah angry, as he knows this is true. Micah is about to shove the knife deeper into Arthur's chest to finish the job, but right before he can, Dutch appears. We don't know how much Dutch saw or heard of the fight, as the only thing he says when he sees Arthur on the ground is "you damn fools." Micah tries to get into Dutch's ear once again by saying that Arthur has lost his mind, but Arthur shuts it down. Arthur says that Micah is the one that should have been killed, not Molly or Miss Grimshaw or even Colm O'Driscoll. He says that Dutch let Micah damn them all, and Dutch doesn't respond. Micah tries to get Dutch to get the money and come with him, but Dutch just backs away with a look of disgust on his face. He knows that Arthur is right. Every time Micah was whispering in Dutch's ear, it always led to the gang being hurt in some way. He's known the whole time that Micah was a greedy dirtbag, but he himself was blinded by greed as well, and the idea that he could fix everything. And to top it all off, Dutch realizes that he is why Arthur is about to die. He wasn't the one to stab Arthur, but he may as well have been. He isn't the reason why Micah was scum, but he let that scum spread to him, which then spread to the others. Molly and Grimshaw were both killed because of Dutch letting Micah get into the gang. Molly was Dutch's lover, and she drunkenly said that she was the rat because Dutch was treating her and everyone else in the gang like shit. Grimshaw died for taking Arthur's side in the standoff that started because Arthur told everyone that Micah was the traitor. Colm was the slimiest guy that Arthur knew and was hated by everyone in the Vanderlyn gang. And Arthur tells Dutch that even Colm of all people deserved to die less than Micah. Dutch doesn't say anything because there's nothing he can say. He realizes what he's done and leaves. Arthur tries to crawl away, but Micah isn't having it. Arthur had been pushing back against almost every one of Micah's ideas throughout the game, and now Arthur had just made Micah lose Dutch, at least for the time being. Micah grabs a knife and stabs Arthur in the back, finally ending the fight. There's one final vision of the Dark Wolf, and Arthur dies with his face in the dirt. He has failed at getting redemption. The high honor version of this starts the same, with Micah tackling and stabbing Arthur on his way out of the cave. Where this ending differs is that when Micah is on top of Arthur about to stab him, Arthur manages to knock Micah off. Dutch then shows up and tells them to just stop this. Dutch is tired of everything at this point. He doesn't want to see them fight, as he's seen all of his gang either leave or die. Arthur's more specific in this when he calls Micah the rat, as he tells Micah to tell Dutch what he said to Agent Milton, the Pinkerton. Dutch looks at Micah with a pain in his face. He knows it's true, but he wants to hear Micah say it isn't. Micah says that Arthur is dying, and Arthur says that Micah's already dead on the inside. He's referring to how Micah is selfish and greedy. He doesn't have empathy or sympathy for others, he only looks out for himself. He turned on Dutch the moment he believed that he would benefit. Micah doesn't have any principles besides look out for himself, and Arthur knows that isn't living. You live for the ones you care about, just like John. Micah doesn't care about anyone, so he isn't living. Dutch once again backs away from Arthur and Micah, unable to fully cope with realizing what he's done. Instead of finishing off Arthur by stabbing in the back, like in the low honor ending, Micah just grabs the money and walks away. Arthur sits up to look at the beauty of the world one last time before dying, and there is one last vision of a majestic buck. Arthur is satisfied that he got to spend his last moments saving John and sticking it to Micah, and he has earned his redemption before dying. The next ending is pretty different from the other two. Arthur decides that the last thing he does will be something good. He continues to escape with John, but reaches a point where he's too tired to go any further. John tries to convince Arthur to go with him, but Arthur says that he's pushed as far as he can. But Arthur doesn't just lay down and die. He fights back against the oncoming onslaught of Pinkertons, and in the middle of the defense, Micah comes up behind Arthur and tackles him to the ground. Arthur immediately calls Micah a rat, and Micah doesn't deny it. Instead, he just says that he's a survivor and all there is living and dying. He starts to beat Arthur, but Arthur rolls them both lower. The two then have a brutal fist fight, which ends with Arthur being unable to stand and crawling towards a nearby gun. When Arthur finally reaches the gun, he's stopped by Dutch. Arthur once again tells Dutch that Micah is a rat, and Micah once again says that Arthur has lost his mind. Arthur tells Dutch that he gave him all he had, and Dutch can only manage out a single word. He cannot bring himself to say anything else. He again realizes that he is the reason Arthur is lying on the ground dying. He also realizes that Arthur is right. John is the only one who made it. John left to spend the rest of his life peacefully with his family. Arthur is dying on the ground, having spent his last bit of energy helping John escape. All Micah and Dutch managed to do was destroy the Vanderlyn gang and piss off everybody they possibly could. Add on the fact that the army is approaching, Dutch cannot cope with everything going on. Micah urges Dutch to come on, but Dutch once again backs away. He leaves by himself, not knowing what to do. Micah draws his gun and aims it at Arthur, telling him that Arthur isn't better than him. Arthur says, "Whatever you say, you fool." They both know that this isn't true. Micah has only done things that benefited him, and Arthur's lying on the ground, having just helped John escape. Micah lets Arthur have the last word before he pulls the trigger. Damn us both! And Arthur dies on his back, facing the sky but surrounded by the cover of night, and there's one last vision of the Dark Wolf. He has not been redeemed, but he spent that last time of his life helping John reunite with his family. It's the same as the last ending until the point when Dutch leaves. Instead of Micah drawing his gun and killing Arthur, he limps away. Arthur then starts to crawl again so he can sit himself next to a rock. Arthur looks at the beauty of the world for one last time and takes his final breath. He dies at the top of a cliff, surrounded by the light, and there's one final vision of the majestic buck. The cliff is a high point, which represents the mountain of redemption that Arthur has climbed. He has redeemed himself. Arthur was always tormented by the fact that he did bad or even evil things. He thought he was following Dutch's ideals of a free society, but instead, he was following Dutch down a path of darkness. Arthur hated the path he was on, but he felt that he owed it to Dutch to continue traveling on it. That is until Dutch had thrown his gang underneath the bus one too many times. He had been growing progressively more heinous throughout the game, and by the end, the Dutch standing before Arthur was not the same Dutch Arthur thought he knew before. Arthur had finally climbed out of the pit of darkness and onto the mountain of redemption, and he died satisfied with that fact. All of the endings share certain aspects. In each one, Micah tries to get Dutch to go with him, and in each one, Dutch cannot bring himself to do anything besides walk away. Dutch realizes that he is the reason why the gang fell apart, why Grimshaw and Molly died, and why Arthur's on the ground, using his last breaths to tell Dutch that Micah is, and always will be, a rat. Dutch can't bring himself to respond in any ending. He finally understands that everything happening around them is his fault, and he doesn't know what to do anymore, which is why in each ending he just walks away. Dutch has finally broken. He will never get back the family, or cult if you prefer, that he has lost, and he will never be able to redeem himself as Arthur had. Micah is the same in each ending, He is always the one to start the fight with Arthur, and in each one, he tries and fails to get back into Dutch's ear. He fails to realize that Dutch has been broken. Micah thinks that Dutch is just like him and that he only looks out for himself. While Dutch wasn't a good man, and he certainly acted selfish, he didn't actually care about the gang, or at the very least he cared about running the gang. And Dutch can't bring himself to continue to run around with the man that helped him destroy the gang. What's interesting is that in both low honor endings, Micah ends up killing Arthur, and in both high honor endings, Micah simply leaves Arthur to die. This is because in the low honor endings, Micah can use the fact that Arthur has also been selfish and greedy to easily kill Arthur, as he believes that Arthur has no right to pretend like he's better than Micah, so he kills him to get the last laugh. In the high honor endings, however, even Micah can't fool himself into believing that Arthur isn't better than he is, so he simply leaves Arthur to die. In all of the endings, Arthur pleads to Dutch that Micah is the rat. Arthur doesn't ever say that Dutch was wrong, or that they wouldn't be in the situation if Dutch hadn't always been listening to Micah, because even if Arthur knows that's true, he can't bring himself to tell the man he spent so much of his life admiring that it's his fault he's on the ground dying. Even with Dutch's fall from grace, if there even was one, and everything that Dutch did, Arthur still loves him. Dutch was a father figure to Arthur, and Arthur can't just throw that away. Arthur spends some of his last moments telling Dutch that Micah is a rat, not to gloat that he was right the whole time or anything, but out of the love he feels for Dutch. He wants Dutch to realize that Micah was a rat long before he started talking to the Pinkertons. Now, I said that he realizes what he did and the consequences of his actions, not that he accepts them. There's a difference between the two. Dutch thinks too highly of himself to actually accept that he is responsible for destroying his own gang. I also said that he realizes that he is the reason why Arthur is dying, which might sound weird at first if you've played the game, as he has not only left John to die twice, but he even left Arthur behind to die once. So why would he care that Arthur's about to die now? Because this time, he has to witness it. The times he left John and Arthur behind to die, he, well, left them behind. He wasn't going to stick around to actually see them die, but he was fully willing to lie to himself and believe that he had to leave them behind for his own safety. In the endings though, he actually watches Arthur die. I do believe that Dutch actually does care about Arthur, but not enough to ever put himself in danger for Arthur, as well as being fully willing to condemn him to death if it means that he benefits from it in some way, such as him reaffirming his position as leader when he leaves Arthur behind in the oil refinery. So to see his son figure die in front of him due to his own actions finally breaks him. And you might think that that's not the case, which yeah, it might not be. That's the beauty of Dutch in this game though. It's up for interpretation on whether he actually believed what he preached, and whether he actually cared about the gang or if he just liked getting high on the power that being the gang leader gave him. Well, it's actually not as ambiguous as I may be making it sound. It's definitely a bit of both. The interpretation is just how far you think he leans towards one or the other. So if you don't believe that Dutch cared at all while watching Arthur die, then his realization in the endings is that his gang is finally over, and it's because of him. Arthur and John were the two most loyal members of the gang, as Dutch had basically adopted them. With John leaving and Arthur dying, there is nobody left to be the boss of, and Dutch knows that Micah isn't anywhere near as loyal as Arthur. Deep down he knows that Arthur's death, leaving John behind, and the dissolution of the gang did not need to happen and occurred because of him, but he will never fully come to terms with that fact. I definitely think it's a mix of Dutch actually having to see Arthur die rather than just leaving him to die, and the fact that Arthur's death represents the death of his gang. Arthur also states that he won in each ending. What he means by this differs a little bit between them though. In the low honor go for the money ending, Arthur says that he won because he revealed to everyone that Micah is a rat. By doing that, he had ruined everything Micah had been building up to. Micah now doesn't have Dutch or the Pinkertons to try and exploit, which means that he lost. In the low honor save John ending, Arthur won because even though he wanted the money, he spent the last minutes of his life helping John reach his family. Arthur won because his last act on Earth was helping someone that he cared about, rather than being selfish and greedy like Micah would have been. In the two high honor endings, Arthur won because he's been redeemed. In these endings, Arthur finally accepts the fact that he was capable of being redeemed the entire time. He overcame his self-loathing and feelings that he was just a bloodthirsty animal, and he takes solace in this fact. Micah, on the other hand, refuses to acknowledge that he's a rat. He believes that he's doing the only thing he can, just like Arthur did, but Micah is heading further and further away from redemption rather than closer towards it. Arthur also manages to give Micah a scar in the high honor go for the money ending, which leaves Micah with a permanent reminder of the man whose last victory in life was outing him as the rat he is. Arthur gives Jon his hat in every ending not as a way of passing the torch, but in a way of going with Jon. Even in the worst ending, where Arthur leaves Jon to get the money, Arthur still cares enough to give Jon his hat. Even Arthur at his worst wants Jon to reach his family and escape from the outlaw lifestyle that has dragged them all down for years. But that's not it for the endings. Each ending has a vision of either a buck or a wolf. These visions are not explained by the game because they don't have to be. They are up for interpretation. I personally believe that the buck covered in light represents what Arthur truly is, a good being that wants to live peacefully. Arthur doesn't like killing and robbing innocent people. He does it because Dutch and the gang do it. He wants to live a peaceful life, and he would be perfectly happy if he was able to roam the country, living free without harming anybody like deer in the forest. The wolf represents how Arthur sees himself, a savage beast that must kill to survive. He doesn't think of himself as a person, but as an animal, and he believes that he doesn't deserve anything, and that he must rob and kill to survive. Which is true to an extent. I'm sure Dutch and some of the gang wouldn't be too thrilled if he decided that he wasn't going to shoot people anymore. The visions of the buck and the high honor endings are Arthur accepting that he does deserve redemption, and that he really is a good guy buried underneath his hardened exterior. The visions of the wolf and the low honor endings are Arthur leaning into what he sees himself as. He sees himself as a mindless animal that kills, so he will be a mindless animal that kills. And there we have it. All 4 endings in Red Dead 2. But that's not the end of the video. Oh no, I still have more to say. So I really like the endings in this game. They all just nail exactly what they're going for. Specifically the Help Jon one, I like that Arthur isn't redeemed. The point of the honor system is that he worked for his redemption. He didn't just get it because at the last second he decided to help Jon. Now mind you, Arthur helping Jon was great, but having Arthur at minimum honor and then getting redeemed just because he helped Jon just doesn't fit with the theme that Arthur got what he deserved. I don't think anybody can deny that Arthur deserved what happened to him, but exactly how he died is what really matters. With low honor, Arthur is killed just as he killed many others. Low honor Arthur acts like an animal and he dies like an animal. High honor Arthur has spent his last time on Earth making amends and helping people. Not because he wanted redemption, but because it was the right thing to do. Arthur doesn't even think he's worthy of redemption until the very end, after he has already achieved it. Before that point, he's just doing good because he feels like that's what he should be doing instead of being an outlaw. And due to this, high honor Arthur gets to die peacefully. He gets to watch the sunrise and take in the beauty of the world that he had spent the time he had left making into a better place.